No one stopped her, but no one welcomed her either. Emma stood still at the gates of the Del Mar Hotel, where one of the most anticipated weddings in high society was about to begin. Her fingers tightened around a thin clutch, her eyes resting on the white flower-lined red carpet leading into the grand hall. The dress she wore, plain black, simple and old, looked nothing like any of the dresses at the event that day. No shimmer, no lace, no glamorous makeup. More precisely, it used to be the uniform she wore every day as a housemaid, and maybe that was why the moment she stepped in, a staff member looked her up and down and casually said, "Wedding staff entrance is out back." Emma smiled a smile too tired to argue. She didn't come to draw attention. She only wanted to see the man the world now called the perfect groom one last time. She passed glances full of curiosity, judgment, and thinly veiled confusion from elegantly dressed guests. No one recognized her. No one remembered the woman who once stood behind the groom's success back in the days when no one believed in him but her. She didn't bring a wedding gift. She brought a memory, and a pair of eyes not accusing, not demanding, just quietly asking, "Are you truly happy?" The atmosphere inside the wedding hall felt like a completely different world. Crystal chandeliers casting light over designer gowns, every step echoing with the confidence of high heels on marble floors. Emma walked slowly, staying close to a tall column near the wall, trying to avoid direct eye contact. She knew this place wasn't meant for her. And she wasn't on any guest list. She hadn't come by invitation. She came because of a promise, once spoken with more sincerity than any vow ever exchanged. At a nearby table, a group of women in expensive silk dresses leaned in and whispered just loud enough for Emma to hear who invited her. "Looks like a maid who got left behind. She must have wandered into the wrong hall." Their words weren't sharp like knives, but they were cold enough to sting. Emma didn't turn around, didn't react. She had grown used to that long ago. Her eyes stayed fixed on the center of the hall where the groom stood. He was the reason she was here. Ethan, the man who once split a packet of instant noodles with her in a tiny ground floor kitchen. The one who used to take her to work on an old scooter through Saigon's rainy streets. And the one who once said, "If I ever make it, I won't forget the first person who believed in me." Emma didn't come to remind him of that. She only wanted to know, had he truly kept his word, or had he forgotten her just like the old shirt she once hand-washed for him? The string quartet began to play the opening notes. A familiar melody filled the space, as if composed just to match the opulence around it. Every eye turned toward the entrance where the bride was about to make her grand entrance. A long veil trailing behind her white dress, glittering with crystals like 1,000 dreams moving at once. She was beautiful just as everyone had said. And at the end of the aisle stood Ethan the groom in a classic black tuxedo, standing tall, his gaze following the bride with an unreadable expression. Emma clutched her bag tightly. She thought of turning away. This moment of joy didn't belong to her. But then, something no one expected happened. As Ethan's eyes swept across the crowd, they stopped, frozen in place, and in the very next second his face changed. He had seen her. For a brief moment, all sound seemed to vanish around him. The music continued, guests kept smiling, the bride kept walking forward. But to Ethan, only one person remained in focus. The girl standing at the back of the hall in that old black dress, eyes sad but free of resentment. Someone behind nudged his shoulder. "Mr. Ethan, please step up to the altar." But he didn't move. His hand holding the wedding ring trembled slightly, because the woman in front of him was no longer just someone from the past. She was a promise never kept, a piece of memory he thought he'd buried, now standing right in front of him, real, alive, more vivid than the vows he was about to say. In a moment so subtle it nearly went unnoticed, Ethan stepped away from his place. No announcement, no music cue, no ritual to justify the act. He walked down from the altar, weaving through rows of guests, his eyes locked onto the woman standing at the end of the hall. Murmurs broke out among the seated crowd. Whispers spilled like water between pews. What is he doing? Did something happen? The bride's still walking. Emma remained still. She couldn't believe it. She hadn't expected anything, not even a glance, let alone this. Ethan stopped in front of her. The entire room fell utterly silent. The bride froze mid-step, stunned bouquet trembling in her hands. Ethan's gaze met Emma's like the world had come to a halt, just the two of them standing in it. Then softly, barely above a whisper, he spoke. "You kept your promise. You came." Emma pressed her lips together, swallowing the trembling in her breath. "I didn't come to interfere. I just wanted to see you. Just once. Truly." He nodded gently. "I thought you wouldn't come, that you'd forgotten. But clearly, the one who forgot was me." At that moment, a sharp voice rang out from the stage. "Ethan, get back! What are you doing?" It was the bride, her face stiff with anger and embarrassment. But Ethan didn't turn back. He remained exactly where he was. Before the woman no one welcomed in the dress, no one accepted carrying a past, no one wanted to remember. Ethan slowly turned to face the entire hall. His gaze was no longer wavering. His expression, neither angry nor emotional, held only clarity. He stepped up a small platform, not returning to the stage, but standing squarely in the aisle between the rows of guests. His voice rang out without a microphone, yet everyone could hear him clearly. "I know many of you are wondering who she is, and why I would stop my own wedding for someone no one here even recognizes." The hall fell into a strange kind of silence. "Then, let me tell you." He turned his eyes to Emma, still standing quietly at the back of the room, clutching her thin clutch tightly. "She's the one who once cooked me a hot meal in a rented room without a kitchen. The one who hand-washed the only dress shirts I owned using cheap soap. The one who stayed up with me all night when I got news that I didn't make it past the final interview. And the one who gave me the last 2 million dong in her savings so I could buy a bus ticket to Hanoi to submit my final job application." His voice caught for a few seconds. "I once swore that if I ever made something of myself, she would be the first person I'd come back to thank." A faint sniff came from somewhere among the guests, but no one dared to laugh. The bride stood frozen bouquet trembling ever so slightly in her hands. Ethan lowered his voice, but his eyes still shone. "I'm not saying this to discredit the bride, or to glorify anyone else. I'm saying it because I need to be honest with myself, because without that past I wouldn't have this present." An uncomfortable hush settled over the wedding hall, as if someone had sliced through the music with an invisible knife. No one clapped. No one spoke. The bride, Kiara, stood there in all her radiant beauty, but now her eyes were a mix of anger and humiliation. Her mother, seated in the front row, leaned toward her and whispered loud enough for many to hear. "You can't let a maid ruin your life. Say something." Emma stood still. She didn't cry. She hadn't come to reclaim anything nor to prove who she was. She only wanted to know whether the man who once promised never to forget her had kept that promise. Ethan turned to face the bride. He stepped up a few stairs closer to her, his eyes meeting the woman he was about to marry, or once planned to marry. "Kiara," he began, his voice dropping low. "I've never questioned the care you've shown me, but if you can't accept someone who was once a part of me, then you'll never truly understand who I am." The bride didn't reply. She only pressed her lips together, clenching her bouquet so tightly the rose petals began to crush beneath her grip. Ethan drew a deep breath. He bowed his head and quietly, deliberately slipped the wedding ring off his finger. "I can't step into a marriage that begins by denying gratitude." That sentence wasn't just for the bride. It was a farewell to a life he had been groomed to chase. A life of polished structure, but not truth. There was no dramatic crash. No one screamed, no background music, no formal announcement that the ceremony was over. Only a heavy stillness lingering between rows of expensive chairs and faces still trying to catch up to what just happened. Ethan didn't leave immediately. He stood there a few seconds longer, as if giving everyone time to realize. It wasn't the woman in the black dress who ruined the wedding. It was the performance by everyone who had forgotten who the beginning of this story truly belonged to. Emma quietly turned around, walking slowly toward the door. No one stopped her. No one said goodbye. She left the Del Mar Hotel the same way she had once left countless homes where she'd worked, silent, alone, leaving behind only an empty space no one would admit was there. But this time was different. This time, someone watched her leave. Ethan didn't call her name. He didn't chase after her like in a fairy tale. He simply stood there, watching the woman who had once helped him rise walk away once more, asking for nothing. Left behind in the hall was a bride without a ring, a furious mother without control, and a wedding with no reason to continue. But out there, beneath the soft glow of the late afternoon sun, a woman was walking away, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She didn't take anything from that place, but she reclaimed something she once thought was lost forever. Her worth. They said that wedding was a PR disaster. A groom who walked off mid-ceremony, a bride stranded on stage, and an uninvited woman turning the whole event into gossip fodder for weeks. But the real story wasn't in the tabloids. It was in the look in Ethan's eyes whenever someone mentioned the word obligation. It was in the quiet composure of Emma, who never once spoke publicly about that afternoon. And then one day, months later, someone spotted Ethan no longer in a perfectly tailored suit, but in a white rolled-up shirt and faded gray jeans, sitting at a small street-side cafe. Across from him was a woman. Her hair tied low, a simple cotton dress, a cup of tea in hand. Emma. No one heard what they said. No one knew whether they got back together or if it was just one last closing of a chapter. All they knew was this time Ethan brought no promises. Only a small hand-wrapped box. Inside, a handwritten note, slightly crooked. "Thank you for once believing in me. I never forgot." The story didn't end with a hug or a kiss. It ended with an acknowledgement that some people come into our lives not to stay, but to remind us of who we once were and who we were always meant to be. Some dresses don't belong on the stage, but they fit just right on a clear conscience. And some people aren't on the guest list, but they're the only ones who help you remember who you are. If you've ever been forgotten, dismissed, or walked into a room where everyone turned away, remember, you don't need an invitation to bring value, because the right people will always see you.